I want to touch on this, Dalton, before we get into everything else, because I have a feeling this could be a fairly fiery topic between you and I, and who doesn't love that. As Aaron Boone today got ejected in the first inning, again, led the league in ejections last year as a manager. He's a fairly fiery guy. Now, the home plate umpire, Hunter Wendelstedt, the way that this kind of played out was Aaron Boone was chirping at him. Hunter Wendelstedt then turns over to the Yankee dugout and says, shut up. I'm doing my job. If I hear one more thing out of you, then you're gone. Aaron Boone kind of gives him the thumbs up. Now, there's video evidence of all of this, right? I guess it looked like it was a fan from behind the Yankee dugout was then continuing to heckle Hunter Wendelstedt. And about 10 seconds later, Wendelstedt turns over and ejects Aaron Boone out of the game. And Aaron Boone immediately goes, well, hey, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. What are you throwing me out for? So Hunter Wendelstedt had this to say after the game. He said, Aaron Boone is the manager of the New York Yankees and is responsible for everything that happens in that dugout. I don't want to eject the ball player. We need to keep them in the game. That's what the fans pay to see. Aaron Boone runs the Yankees. He got ejected. And I'm sure that there was more to that quote than that. I'm pulling that from Brian Hoke, the Yankee beat writer. But Dalton, listen, I think I have a fairly unique point of view on this because I've been umpiring for 15 years, right? So I am an umpire sympathizer more than most, right? But I want to get your take on this first.
Well, look, my issue, I think part of where you're going to go with this is that Aaron Boone can act like a fiery idiot hothead, and you think that that's probably maybe something that hurts the Yankees. That's like maybe where I'm guessing you're going to go.
No, actually not at all.
Okay. Well, so here's where I go with this. Like this whole thing post game, well, Aaron Judge is responsible for the Yankees. Sure. He's not responsible for their fans. He is not.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Period. So this idea that Aaron Boone being held responsible for something that's being said by a fan behind the dugout is completely absurd. The problem I have with all of it is that, like, there's very clear video evidence. Like, you can tell if, like, the game's televised, right? Like, you can tell that it was the fan that was causing the ejection. To me, the umpire then, because the other quote you didn't read that Brian Hoke tweeted out is, the umpire doubled down. He goes, I heard something come from the far end of the dugout.
From the far end of the dugout, correct.
Had nothing to do with his area, but he's the manager of the Yankees, so he's the one that had to go. Look, my issue with this is what Hunter Wendelstedt is telling me is, I don't know who deserved to be ejected, so I ejected the manager.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know who deserves to be ejected, you shouldn't be ejecting anybody.
Yeah.
You should either figure out who needs to be ejected and eject them, or don't eject anybody, period. Yeah. Like, if you're going to talk about, I think it was coming from the other end of the dugout, well, then turn your head and look and figure out who's yelling at you and eject them if you think it's coming from the other end of the dugout.
Right.
Truthfully, I think he's full of shit. He didn't think it was coming from the other end of the dugout. He thought it was Aaron Boone. He didn't look to verify that, and he threw him out of the game, and that's wrong. One batter into the game. How much of a stink could Aaron Boone have really been making one batter into the game? And he tosses him out of the game, and you can tell on video Aaron Boone's not saying a word.
Yeah.
So, look, like, there's no – at the end of the day, it cannot be too much to ask of an umpire to turn and figure out who's yelling at you before you make an ejection.
Yeah.
Because you might be saying, I ejected a coach, not a player, because the fans want to see the player. Yeah, but ejecting a manager can still matter, right? Like,
sure.
That's what the manager's paid to do. He's paid to be there and manage the ball game, and he's sitting there behaving. Like, I get why Aaron Boone was pissed. I'd be pissed too. Yeah. Like, it's bullshit. That shouldn't happen from an umpire. Like, turn and figure out who's yelling at you. If that's too much to ask, then go find another job.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because you're right. He's absolutely responsible for everybody in the dugout. And And he's not responsible for the fans. That's goes without saying. The interesting part about this is that I agree with you. I think Hunter Wendelstedt is kind of full of shit, and I think that he ejected Aaron Boone prematurely. And I think that because here's the thing about umpires, right? If you are getting chirped at all game, and Hunter Wendelstedt's been doing this for 27 years at the major league
Right.
level, right? Like he's been an umpire for a long, long, long time.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't care how much thick skin you have. If people have been telling you, if you have a stadiums full of 50 plus thousand people and all of these professional baseball players and managers and coaches and everything like that telling you suck for 27 years, it takes a toll on a man. I'm just going to say that. So
Sure.
it does not surprise me when some umpires have maybe too short of a leash on certain days, right?
Sure.
I think in reality, the entire stigma, right, of, and again, in this certain situation, I don't necessarily think that Hunter Wendelstedt did the right thing of ejecting Aaron Boone. I thought that was a little premature. But the issue that I have is that I feel like we're kind of growing into a stigma in Major League Baseball of any time an umpire shows any bit of emotion towards a player, it is now a power trip on the umpire. Like I don't get that, right? Like the
I
player and
do.
the coach can what's that?
I do. I think that's the right opinion to have.
I I don't think so. I don't think that it's right for you to act like if the player and the coach are allowed to act like an ass, then I think the umpire is allowed to be an ass back to you. Like I don't think that the umpire position is this all professional job of like you can't act a certain way because you're an umpire. I think you can act in a certain way towards players and towards coaches if that's how they're acting towards you. That's
Okay.
my old position on this whole thing.
So two things about that, right? Number
Mhm.
one, are you under the impression that like players can act like asses toward umpires and it doesn't get punished?
No, of course,
That's-
absolutely not. You're right.
okay, right. So there are consequences to that. So let's not think there aren't. First of all,
No, you're right. There are, but I'm saying, but through the public eye, right? Because I'm not necessarily talking about rules on the field. What I'm talking about really is how it is viewed amongst the public. Is that if a player shows some sort of emotion towards an umpire, and an umpire shows emotion towards him back, and it gets him thrown out of the game, it then becomes this stigma of, man, these umpires really need to be held accountable. I just don't buy that.
so I
Buy it.
do, and the reason I do is the player is making the money he's making because of his ability to play baseball.
Sure.
If he goes outside of that ability and acts like an asshole, he'll get kicked off the field.
Correct.
I don't think there's any problem with any of that, right?
You're right.
As an umpire, what you are getting paid to do is to be level headed. That is your entire job description. That is central to your job description, is to be level headed and not let your emotions affect how you are interacting with the game. That is your chief job. That is your number one job. Like dealing with players being angry is part of that. So to me, like it is central to the job description of an umpire to be level headed and to not react to people around you not being level headed. Like that's the job. So in that sense, like we're yeah, sure. I'm not saying that like umpires don't ever have reason to react to a player, but to me, whether you have reason or not, you're getting paid not to react to that player.
Mhm.
And guess what? Guess what you have at your disposal? That finger that you can throw them out of the game with, right?
Right.
Like player can't throw you out of the game, you can throw them out of the game. As a result of that, as a result of having that leverage, your job is to stay level headed. That's just how I view it. To me,
Yeah.
and look, one thing I will say, people on social media like to be really extreme about things, right?
Sure.
Like there were fans responding to the Yankee beat writer saying things like, "Well, that should be the last game he ever works." Please, like,
Yeah, come on.
like, look, he had like Wendelstedt had a moment where he reacted to something too quickly and threw a manager out of the game. Like, realistically,
Right.
what he should probably do is be like, "Hey, my bad. I reacted poorly in the moment. Whatever," and you move on. It's not that big of a deal. Like this whole, "Oh, he needs to be disciplined. He needs to be fired." No, like guys make mistakes at work. It's life. Like
Correct.
we all make mistakes at work. So
Yeah,
I,
right.
I will say that, but I do think the umpires have a responsibility to be above it with a lot of this stuff.
Well, listen, that's fair. That's fair. I kind of fall under the line of like, okay, you because you're right. Part of your job is to deal with players that are being emotional, right? Like that's part of the job description. I also think that as long as the game is being called fairly, I don't know that how you act as an umpire matters all that much. Like I just don't, right? It there comes a point, obviously, just like everything in life, there's a line, right? As long as you're not ejecting everybody, like you're trigger happy with ejecting guys, and you're not ejecting nobody. There's a fair line to say, okay, like okay, there's a line with everything. But as long as the game's being called fairly, I don't really know that I care about anything else. That's it. You know what I
That's
mean?
fine. You don't have to care about more than that, right? But
Yeah.
their job description is more than that. So that's how I look at it.
Okay.